The warning klaxons screamed through the cargo ship's bridge as Jackson Reed fought with the failing controls. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits, while the viewport showed nothing but the swirling purple atmosphere of an unknown world rushing toward him. His ship, the Wandering Star, had been running a routine supply mission to the outer colonies when pirates had ambushed him near the Zarian system. "Come on, baby. Hold together," Jackson muttered through gritted teeth, his calloused hands dancing across the emergency panels. The ship bucked and twisted as it hit the planet's upper atmosphere, metal groaning under impossible stress. He had maybe 30 seconds before impact. The surface below was a maze of crimson forests and jagged mountain ranges. According to his failing navigation system, this was Zerion Prime, a world marked with the highest danger classification in galactic charts. No settlements, no rescue stations, and according to legend, home to creatures so deadly that even the most hardened explorers avoided it completely. Jackson's escape pod ejected just as the main ship exploded in a brilliant orange fireball. The small pod tumbled through thick canopy branches, each impact rattling his bones, until it finally crashed into a clearing with a sickening crunch of twisted metal. Silence fell like a heavy blanket. Jackson tasted blood on his tongue and felt warm liquid trickling down his forehead. His ribs ached with each breath, but he was alive. The pod's emergency systems flickered weakly, casting strange shadows on his bruised face. Emergency beacon activated. The computer's voice crackled. "Warning. Zerion Prime is a restricted quarantine zone. Rescue probability, less than 5%. "Well, that's encouraging," Jackson said with dark humor, unbuckling himself from the pilot's seat. He grabbed his emergency pack and forced open the warped pod door. The alien world hit him like a physical blow. The air was thick and warm, filled with exotic scents that made his head spin. Towering trees with silver bark stretched impossibly high, their leaves shimmering with an inner light. Strange flowers pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, and in the distance, he could hear sounds unlike anything on Earth. Haunting calls that seemed almost musical. Jackson had traveled to dozens of worlds in his career as a cargo pilot, but Zerion Prime felt different. Ancient. Alive in ways that made his skin crawl and his heart race simultaneously. A branch snapped behind him. He spun around, hand instinctively reaching for the plasma cutter at his belt. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a figure that shouldn't exist, humanoid but clearly not human. She was tall and graceful, covered in fur that shifted from deep auburn to bright orange in the dappled sunlight. Her face was elegantly feminine but distinctly fox-like, with large pointed ears that twitched at every sound. Golden eyes watched him with intelligence that was definitely not animal. She wore simple leather wrappings that left little to the imagination, and a long, bushy tail swayed behind her with nervous energy. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Jackson had heard stories of the Vulpine, a species that had mysteriously vanished from galactic records decades ago. Most people assumed they were extinct. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, in accented but clear galactic standard, her voice melodic but tinged with warning. "Neither are you, I think," Jackson replied carefully, keeping his hands visible and away from weapons. "I'm Jackson. My ship crashed." The Vulpine woman tilted her head, studying him with those incredible golden eyes. "I am Kira Silverwind, and you are either very brave or very foolish to land on this world." "Definitely foolish," Jackson admitted with a rueful smile. The landing wasn't exactly voluntary. Kira's ears perked forward slightly, and Jackson caught what might have been amusement in her expression. But then her entire posture changed, fur standing on end as she looked past him toward the tree line. "We need to move," she said urgently. "Now." That's when Jackson heard it, a low rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The very air vibrated with menace, and smaller creatures in the forest fell silent. Even the strange musical call stopped abruptly. Something massive was moving through the trees toward them. "What is that?" Jackson whispered, but Kira was already backing away, her tail bushy with fear. Shadowstalker, she breathed. The apex predator of this world. Nothing. Survives an encounter with one. We have to run. But it was too late. The undergrowth parted like a curtain, and the most terrifying creature Jackson had ever seen stepped into the clearing. It stood nearly 3 meters tall at the shoulder, covered in scales that seemed to absorb light itself. Its head was a nightmare, fusion of reptile and mammal, with 6 eyes that glowed like molten gold and teeth longer than Jackson's forearm. Massive claws scored the earth with each step, and its tail, armed with wicked spikes, lashed behind it. This was Grimclaw, though Jackson didn't know its name yet. Legends spoke of Shadowstalkers as unstoppable killing machines that had wiped out entire research expeditions. The creature's reputation was so fearsome that most spacers would rather face a black hole than meet one in person. Kira froze completely, every instinct telling her that movement meant death. The Shadowstalker's 6 eyes fixed on Jackson, and it took a deliberate step forward, claws extended. But something incredible happened next. Instead of running or reaching for his weapon, Jackson did something that defied all logic and survival instinct. He slowly extended his hand toward the massive predator, palm up in a gesture of peace. "Easy there, big guy," he said softly, his voice calm despite the situation. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." Kira's golden eyes went wide with shock. No creature in the galaxy approached a Shadowstalker voluntarily. It was suicide. The massive predator paused, tilting its enormous head. The 6 glowing eyes studied Jackson with something that looked almost like curiosity. For several heartbeats, predator and human regarded each other in silence. Then, impossibly, Grimclaw lowered its massive head and allowed Jackson to place his hand on the armored snout. "Impossible," Kira whispered, her voice filled with wonder and disbelief. The Shadowstalker's eyes closed briefly at Jackson's touch, and something that might have been a purr rumbled from its chest. When it opened its eyes again, there was no hostility there, only an ancient intelligence that seemed to recognize something in the human that others had missed. Jackson smiled, feeling the warm scales under his palm. "You're not really a monster, are you? Just misunderstood." Kira stared in absolute amazement as the galaxy's most feared predator gently nuzzled against Jackson's hand like an oversized pet. Everything she had been taught about humans, about Shadowstalkers, about the natural order of things, crumbled in that single moment. "How?" she breathed. Jackson looked over at her, still stroking the massive creature's snout. "Sometimes the scariest. Things just need someone to show them kindness first." The Shadowstalker rumbled again, then turned and disappeared back into the forest as silently as it had arrived, leaving Jackson and Kira alone in the clearing with the wreckage of everything they thought they knew about the universe. Kira stared at the human with new eyes, her heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Kira couldn't stop staring at Jackson as they walked through the crimson forest. Her golden eyes kept darting to his hands, the same hands that had touched a Shadowstalker and lived to tell about it. In all her years surviving on Xerion Prime, she had never seen anything like what happened in that clearing. "You're different from the stories," she said finally, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for the past hour. Jackson glanced at her, noting how gracefully she moved through the tangled undergrowth, where he stumbled over roots and pushed through hanging vines. She flowed like liquid fire, her fox-like features alert to every sound and scent. "What stories?" he asked, genuinely curious. Kira's ears flattened slightly. "The stories my people told about humans before." She paused, pain flickering across her beautiful features. Before the corporations came and destroyed everything, they had been walking toward what Kira called the Ancient Grove, a place she claimed would be safe for the night. As they traveled, Jackson learned more about his mysterious companion. She was the last of her clan, possibly the last Vulpari alive. Her people had been wiped out by corporate raiders seeking to harvest the planet's unique resources, and she had been hiding in the wilderness for 3 years. "I'm sorry," Jackson said softly, "about your people." Kira's tail swished behind her and she gave him a look he couldn't quite read. "You say that like you mean it." "I do mean it." She stopped walking and turned to face him fully. "Why?" You don't know me. My people were supposedly nothing but primitives living on a restricted world. Why would a human care? Jackson met her golden gaze steadily. Because every life matters. Because you're standing right here in front of me, and you're real, and you're hurting. That's enough. Something shifted in Kira's expression. Her ears perked forward, and for the first time since they'd met, her guard seemed to lower slightly. The stories said humans were cold, calculating, that they saw other species as resources to be exploited. Some humans are like that, Jackson admitted. But not all of us. As if summoned by their conversation, a low howl echoed through the forest. Both of them froze and Kira's fur stood on end. Razorback pack, she whispered. They hunt in groups. Very dangerous. Through the trees, Jackson could see shapes moving in the shadows. Creatures the size of earth wolves, but covered in metallic, spines that gleamed in the filtered sunlight. Their eyes glowed red, and their howls were answered by others from different directions. How many? Jackson asked quietly. At least 6, Kira replied, her hand moving to a curved blade at her hip. Maybe more. The pack leader emerged from behind, a massive tree trunk, its spine-covered hide bristling with aggression. It was larger than the others, with scars across its muzzle that spoke of many battles. The creature's red eyes fixed on them, and it let out a snarling growl that was picked up by the rest of the pack. They're surrounding us, Kira breathed, but instead of drawing his plasma cutter, Jackson did something that made Kira's heart skip a beat. He stepped forward, placing himself between her and the pack leader. Easy, he said in the same calm tone he had used with Grimclaw. We're just passing through. No trouble. The pack leader snarled, showing teeth like metallic needles. It took another step forward and Jackson could smell its predatory musk. Behind him he heard Kira draw her blade. Jackson, they're not like Grimclaw, she warned. Razorbacks are pack hunters, they won't hesitate to kill. But Jackson had noticed something the others had missed. The pack leader's left front paw was injured, a deep gash that was clearly causing pain. The creature was trying to hide its weakness from its pack, but Jackson's trained eye caught the subtle limp. Slowly, carefully, he reached into his emergency pack and pulled out a medical kit. The pack leader's eyes tracked the movement, muscles tensing for an attack. You're hurt, Jackson said softly. I can help. He opened the kit and took out a spray bandage, holding it where the creature could see it. The pack leader's red eyes narrowed, intelligence warring with instinct. Kira watched in amazement as Jackson slowly knelt down, making himself vulnerable to the deadly predator. What are you doing? She whispered. Building trust, Jackson replied without taking his eyes off the pack. Hider. The standoff lasted for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Then, incredibly, the pack leader limped forward and extended its injured paw toward Jackson. Impossible, Kira breathed for the second time that day. Jackson carefully cleaned and treated the wound while the massive predator stood perfectly still. The other Razorbacks watched in confusion as their leader allowed a human to tend to his injury. When Jackson finished, the pack leader tested his paw, found the pain greatly reduced, and looked at the human with something approaching gratitude. The creature let out a different kind of howl, and the rest of the pack slowly backed away into the forest. Before disappearing, the leader touched its nose briefly to Jackson's outstretched hand, then vanished into the undergrowth. Kira stared at Jackson as he packed away his medical supplies. How do you do that? Do what? See past the teeth and claws, to what's really there. Jackson shrugged, but there was something deeper in his eyes. My grandmother used to say that fear makes everything look like a monster, but if you can get past the fear, sometimes you find a friend instead. They resumed walking, but the atmosphere between them had changed again. Kira found herself studying Jackson's profile as they moved through the forest. He wasn't particularly tall or muscular, didn't carry himself like a warrior or speak like a diplomat, but there was something about him that drew her, something that made the most dangerous creatures on her world respond to him with trust instead of aggression. Tell me about your grandmother, she said softly. Jackson smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face. She was a veterinarian on Earth's Luna colony, used to say that every creature, no matter how fierce, just wants to be understood. She taught me that empathy isn't weakness, it's the strongest force in the universe. As they crested a small hill, the ancient grove came into view. Massive trees with silver bark spiraled toward the sky, their branches intertwining to form a natural cathedral. Bioluminescent flowers provided soft blue light, and the air hummed with peaceful energy. "It's beautiful," Jackson breathed. Kira led him to the center of the grove, where ancient stone ruins poked through the forest floor. "My people built this place long ago," she explained. "It was a temple, a place of learning." As they explored the ruins, Kira found herself walking closer to Jackson, their shoulders occasionally brushing. Each contact sent small thrills through her fur, and she caught herself breathing in his scent, something uniquely human that made her pulse quicken. They made camp in a sheltered alcove between two fallen pillars. As night fell, Sirian Prime's 3 moons rose, casting everything in ethereal silver light. Kira built a small fire while Jackson shared his emergency rations. "Can I ask you something?" Jackson said as they sat across from each other, the fire dancing between them. Kira nodded, her golden eyes reflecting the flames. "Why did you help me today? You could have let the Razorbacks attack, then slipped away in the confusion." Kira was quiet for a long moment, her tail curled around her feet. "Because you didn't run when you saw me. Most humans would have seen a dangerous alien and reacted with violence or fear. But you—" She looked up at him. "You introduced yourself, like I was a person worth knowing." Their eyes met across the fire and something electric passed between them. Kira felt her breath catch as Jackson leaned slightly forward. "You are worth knowing," he said softly. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and growing attraction. Kira found herself leaning toward him as well, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. But then a distant sound broke the spell, the mechanical whine of engines in the atmosphere. They both looked up to see lights moving across the star-filled sky. "Ships," Jackson said grimly. Kira's ears flattened against her head. "Corporate hunters. They must have tracked your beacon." As if to confirm her fears, a harsh voice crackled from a loudspeaker somewhere in the distance. "Attention, crashed vessel. This is Nexus Corporation security. You are on restricted corporate property. Surrender immediately for processing." Jackson and Kira looked at each other across the dying fire, both knowing their peaceful interlude was over. Whatever was growing between them would have to wait. Survival came first. But as they prepared to flee deeper into the wilderness, Kira made a decision that surprised even her. She reached across the space between them and took Jackson's hand in her own. "Whatever happens," she said firmly, "we face it together." Jackson squeezed her hand gently, marveling at how perfectly it fit with his. "Together," he agreed. The corporate hunters moved through the forest like a plague of metal and malice. Their powered armor gleamed dully in the moonlight, and their energy weapons hummed with deadly potential. Kira counted at least 12 soldiers, plus hover drones, scanning the area with searchlights that cut through the darkness like blades. "Target located," crackled a voice through their comm systems. "One human male, one unidentified alien female, moving to intercept." Jackson and Kira pressed themselves against the ancient stone ruins, hearts pounding in perfect synchronization. Her hand was still in his, and he could feel her trembling, not with fear, but with rage. "They killed my family for resources," she whispered, her golden eyes burning with fury. "Strip-mined our sacred sites, and now they come for us too." "Not if I can help it," Jackson replied, surprising himself with the steel in his voice. The lead hunter stepped into the grove, his helmet scanner sweeping back and forth. "Corporate salvage rights are in effect. The human will be debriefed and relocated. The alien specimen will be secured for biological research." Specimen. The word hit Kira like a physical blow, and her claws extended instinctively, but Jackson had heard enough. Standing up from their hiding place, he stepped into full view of the hunters. "I'm here," he called out. "Let's talk." "Jackson, no," Kira hissed, but he squeezed her hand reassuringly. The lead hunter raised his weapon. Step away from the alien civilian. Corporate policy requires immediate containment of unknown species. Her name is Kira, Jackson said firmly, not moving an inch. She's a person, not a specimen, and I'm not going anywhere without her. The hunter's weapon powered up with an ominous whine. Final warning. Step away or we will use force. That's when the forest came alive. A bone-shaking roar echoed through the grove as Grimclaw burst from the tree line. The massive Shadowstalker's 6 eyes blazed with fury as it saw armed intruders threatening the human who had shown it kindness. Behind it came the Razorback pack, their metallic spines gleaming as they surrounded the corporate soldiers. But they weren't alone. Drawn by some primal call, dozens of other creatures emerged from the darkness. Flying serpents with iridescent wings, armored bears with crystal claws, and things that had no names in any human language. All of them focused on the hunters with obvious hostile intent. What the hell? One of the soldiers gasped, his weapon wavering between targets. Jackson stepped forward, still holding Kira's hand, and something extraordinary happened. Every creature in the grove turned to look at him, waiting. The apex predators of an entire world, creatures that should have been tearing each other apart, stood united in perfect harmony. This is their world, Jackson said, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. And she is their daughter. You want to take her? You'll have to go through all of us. The lead hunter's finger tightened on his trigger. Impossible. No human has this kind of influence over alien fauna. You must be using some kind of pheromone device. No device, Jackson replied simply. Just respect. Grimclaw took a step forward, its massive claws scoring deep furrows in the stone. The Razorback pack spread out, cutting off escape routes. Above them, the flying serpents circled like living storm clouds. Sir, one of the younger hunters said nervously, maybe we should reconsider. These are Category 5 predators. Stand down, the leader snapped. Corporate orders are absolute. He raised his weapon toward Kira, but before he could fire, Jackson moved. In one fluid motion, he swept Kira behind him and faced down the barrel of the energy rifle. If you want to hurt her, he said quietly, you'll have to kill me first. Kira's breath caught in her throat. No one had ever put themselves at risk for her, especially not someone from the species that had destroyed her world. But here was this strange, gentle human literally standing between her and death. You barely know me, she whispered. Jackson looked back at her over his shoulder, and the smile he gave her was radiant. I know enough. I know you're brave and beautiful and kind. I know you've been alone too long. And I know that what I feel for you is worth fighting for. The words hit Kira like lightning. In the space of 2 days, this impossible human had shown her wonders she'd never imagined. He'd connected with creatures that had terrorized her for years. He'd seen past her alien appearance to the person underneath. And now he was willing to die for her. I love you too, she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. The admission hung in the air between them like a bridge spanning 2 worlds. Human and alien, predator and prey, survivor and rescuer. None of those labels mattered anymore. What mattered was the bond that had formed between 2 souls who had found each other in the darkness. The lead hunter cursed and fired, but the energy bolt never reached its target. Grimclaw moved with impossible speed for something so massive, intercepting the shot with its armored hide. The blast barely singed its scales, and the Shadowstalker's roar of fury shook leaves from the trees. Take them down, the hunter screamed, but his words were lost in chaos. The battle was brief and decisive. The creatures of Zarian Prime, united by their protector's call, overwhelmed the corporate soldiers with sheer numbers and primal fury. Energy weapons discharged wildly, but the aliens moved like liquid shadow, avoiding most shots and shrugging off the rest. Within minutes, the hunters were either unconscious or fleeing back to their ships, leaving their equipment scattered across the grove floor. As the dust settled, Jackson and Kira found themselves alone again, surrounded by their unlikely allies. Grimclaw approached slowly, its massive head lowering to nuzzle Jackson's shoulder. The human laughed and scratched behind the creature's armored ears. "Good boy," he said affectionately. "Thank you for protecting us." The shadow stalker rumbled contentedly, then turned and disappeared back into the forest. One by one, the other creatures followed, until only the razorback pack leader remained. The scarred predator approached Kira and touched its nose to her, hand in a gesture of respect before vanishing into the night. "They accepted you," Kira said in wonder. "All of them. Because you accepted me." Jackson turned to face her fully, and suddenly the space between them seemed both infinite and non-existent. "Kira, I meant what I said, what I feel for you." She silenced him by placing a clawed finger gently against his lips. "Show me." The kiss was electric, a fusion of human passion and alien grace that sent shivers through both their bodies. Kira's fur was impossibly soft against Jackson's skin, and her scent filled his senses with exotic spices and wild honey. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. "The corporations will send more hunters," Kira said, though she made no move to leave his arms. "Let them come," Jackson replied, stroking her silky fur. "This world has guardians now, and besides," he grinned, "I've got friends in low places." As if summoned by his words, Grimclaw's distant roar echoed through the forest, answered by dozens of other calls. The message was clear. Xerion Prime was under new management. 3 months later, Jackson stood on the observation deck of the newly established research station, watching Kira work with a team of xenobiologists who had come to study the planet's incredible ecosystem. Unlike the corporate raiders, these scientists treated the native species with respect and wonder. "The symbiotic relationships here are unlike anything we've seen," Dr. Winters was saying to his colleagues. "The human subject seems to have triggered some kind of empathic response in the local fauna." Jackson smiled. He'd tried to explain it to them. But few humans understood what his grandmother had taught him about looking past fear to find connection. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Xerion Prime was now protected, its creatures safe from exploitation. Kira appeared beside him, sliding her arms around his waist from behind. Her pregnancy was just beginning to show, a miracle of interspecies compatibility that had shocked the scientific community. "The cubs are active today," she murmured against his ear, her breath warm on his skin. "Cubs?" Jackson laughed, covering her hands with his own. "Plural? Vulpari usually have litters," she said with a mischievous grin. "Did I forget to mention that?" As Xerion Prime's 3 moons rose over the research station, casting everything in silver light, Jackson reflected on how much his life had changed. He'd crashed on this world as a simple cargo pilot running from pirates. Now he was the guardian of an entire ecosystem, the mate of an alien princess, and soon to be the father of the first human Vulpari children in galactic history. "Any regrets?" Kira asked softly. Jackson turned in her arms and kissed her deeply, tasting the wild freedom of unexplored worlds and the sweet promise of forever. "Not a single one," he whispered against her lips. Outside their window, Grimclaw's roar echoed across the forest, a sound of pure contentment. The galaxy's deadliest beast had found peace, just like the human who had dared to see past its fearsome exterior to the gentle soul within. And in the end, that made all the difference.